We also have satellite images of the F-15 1635 hangar at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base, which was destroyed. The Pentagon came out and said that they may scale down the military presence that they have in Kuwait following retaliatory strikes from Iran. It's not just Kuwait that is calling for a drawdown of troops. Apparently, Jordanians are also not too happy with this occupation of U.S. troops in their country. The United States claims to be in a period of negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Trump has repeatedly claimed over the last 4 or 5 days that he's been talking to the Iranians, and he's so shocked that the Iranians decided to launch some missiles over the past 48 hours at Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain. But the Iranians never said they were in the middle of negotiations. They did, in fact, admit that the U.S. came begging for a ceasefire through Iraq, through Oman, through Pakistan, and eventually, when all of these efforts failed, they went with this public display of just humiliating begging and made it a public affair and said, "Oh, we want to ceasefire. We want to negotiate. Can we negotiate? We're in negotiations now." So that's how Trump believes negotiations work. Is, I guess, if he says it's happening, it's happening. All right. Iran consistently stated that we're not negotiating. We're not in the middle of negotiations. This is not happening. And I'll be the first to say that, like, okay, Iran has kind of said that before, and then they're actually negotiating on the back end. So I didn't really know what to believe. But now I do, because in the middle of the so-called negotiations, which Iran has said that these things don't exist, it's not happening, they decided to launch some missiles. And why did they launch the missiles? That's a good question. We're going to get into exactly what they hit. They hit fighter jets, and it's causing quite a stir in the Gulf region. But the reason why they did this is because, if you remember, Saudi Arabia was too cowardly to respond to the Yemeni strikes on several Saudi Aramco facilities, and they blamed some of the attacks on the Yanbu pipeline, the east to west pipeline. They blamed it on the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces, like the Al-Shahada Brigades, Al-Nujaba, Kataib Hezbollah. And then the Iraqi PMF came out and said, well, we had nothing to do with that. That was Yemen, and Saudi Arabia is too cowardly to respond to Yemen, so they're trying to blame us. So they don't have to respond to Yemen, so they don't have to continue to escalate. So Saudi Arabia responds to Iraq. They bomb Iraqi PMF positions with the United States. They launch over 20 different airstrikes, and obviously the Iraqi PMF falls within what we call the axes of resistance, led up by the Islamic Republic of Iran. So Iran decided to respond by hitting several, U.S. targets in the Gulf region, and they did so with pinpoint accuracy. So let's take a look at exactly who they hit and what they hit. Okay, first we had this July 29th. This was at about 1:30 a.m. July 29th, local time in Iran. Ballistic missiles were launched from Iran targeting U.S. bases in Jordan. We had interception attempts at Muwafaq Salti Air Base. I mean, this air base is long dead and over. Muwafaq Salti is just like ash and rubble at this point. I don't know if you saw the map. I published, photos, TikToks of this map where it's like 60 different impact sites. At least 60, I should say, over the past 15 days. And that, of course, is the base where we saw the unaliving of 3 U.S. service members, which Trump claims has nothing to do with the Iran war. Now, I'm sure Jordan came out and the CENTCOM came out and they said, we intercepted all the attacks. But as always, we have the photos to prove otherwise. There were direct impacts at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base. Someone in chat is saying only 3 soldiers were unalived. Yes, there was 4 soldiers unalived in the past 15 days. One of them was unalived in Iraqi Kurdistan. They were trying to neutralize a downed Iranian drone, and it exploded in their face. So that person was actually killed in Iraqi Kurdistan, not in the Muwafaq Salti Air Base. So there you have it. We have proof. The IRGC, this is from Mario Nafal. The IRGC is claiming, I love how he always, prefaces every single post with like, oh, well, we can't trust Iran because it's an Iranian claim. This is what they all did about Palestine. The Palestinian Ministry of Health says, as if like the people on the ground who are witnessing all of the massacres don't know how many people are being killed, right? The IRGC is claiming it destroyed 3 U.S. F-35s in Jordan. They're saying they hit Muwafaq Salti Air Base with ballistic missiles. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, they did. We have okay. I'll entertain it. Mario, if it wasn't an Iranian missile / drone that hit the Muwafaq Salti Air Base, and by the way, we do have photos of these missiles being launched from Iran. What caused this giant plume of smoke? What caused this? I mean, were the Jordanians out there cooking kebabs and the grill caught on fire and it exploded and caused this giant plume of what caused this, if not but an Iranian strike? Okay. So they're claiming they hit all this. Well, it's not just that we have footage of an impact. We also have satellite images, albeit blurry, of the F-15 1635 hangar at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base, which was destroyed. Not the first one we've seen over the past 20 or so days, which has been destroyed by the Iranians, but in fact, yet another one of these F-15 35 hangars, which was destroyed. Now, I will put a big question mark on whether or not F-35s were destroyed in this. It's very possible they were destroyed in this, but we do have satellite imagery which indicated that the U.S. had evacuated this base. Of course, they could have done a fake evacuation and they, put the F-35s right back in the same hangars that had been either lightly hit or lightly damaged on Muwafaq Salti Air Base, and it was all a fake out operation. But we do have insider information leaked from the families of U.S. service members in the region right about the same time that we assumed via satellite image that this base was at least partially evacuated, that in fact there was an evacuation of a major base in the Gulf, and that other bases were going to be essentially taking in all these refugee troops. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was evacuated. Then again, the Iranians have very good intelligence, much better than I can surmise from just looking at random Telegram accounts. And if they're saying they hit it, I kind of believe them. Now, we also have this. The IRGC struck the Al Azraq Air Base in Jordan as well. 3 U.S. F-35s were claimed to have been hit, damaged 3 others, and killed several U.S. officers and technical personnel. It also claimed to have struck the U.S. Ali al-Salim Air Base in Kuwait, destroying 2 drone hangars and a fuel tank serving military aircraft and helicopters. Now, as for the Ali al-Salim Air Base, Kuwait did come out and admit that, yes, there was an attack. There was an Iranian drone attack and missile attack, but we dealt with it. I'm going to put a big fat lie on that statement from the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense. And you'll see why in a second, because it was hit again. And we have further proof that, they did not actually neutralize this threat. Now, just a few moments before I went live here, there was an announcement that after these strikes on Kuwait, there was 2 strikes that we recorded on Kuwait over the past 24 hours. The Pentagon came out and said that they may scale down the military presence that they have in Kuwait following retaliatory strikes from Iran. The U.S. is actively rethinking its strategic bilateral ties and military posture in Kuwait in the wake of the recent retaliatory strikes from Iran. Since the Gulf nation's independence decades ago, the U.S. is blah, 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 blah. They've had all these bases there. While intelligence assessments report that Kuwait weathered recent Iranian military strikes, the broader hostilities have exposed severe vulnerabilities, undermined long-standing security arrangements, and forced a critical reassessment in the wake of unprecedented missile and drone attacks targeting regional bases. In response to sustained Iranian assaults on military infrastructure, Pentagon leadership is actively moving to downsize its footprint, reduce personnel, and withdraw assets within Kuwait. Now, this is according to U.S. defense officials speaking anonymously to the Wall Street Journal. Now, it's worth noting that Iran, over the past 20 days, they hit Kuwait harder than anyone else, undoubtedly. right? Yes, the Muwafaq Salti Air Base was hit very hard, but Kuwait was hit harder. There were at least 4 different instances in which either Kuwaiti power plants, desalination plants, or major generation electricity generation plants were hit by the Iranians. And that is a huge escalation from Iran. Of course, it was retaliatory because first we had what was it? ATACMS. I think it was ATACMS missiles, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken about that. But ATACMS launched missiles were used to strike Iranian energy infrastructure on some of their islands, okay, near Bandar Abbas. So it was retaliatory. But here's why I have questions about this story. Again, a story that was put in the Wall Street Journal by U.S. defense officials. Could be true. Could be very true. Could also be questionable because we know for a fact the Iranians are, I guess you could say, aware of a possible U.S. military plan to invade Iran, crossing Iraq's Al-Fa Peninsula from Kuwait. So if Kuwait is saying that, oh, we're scaling down the U.S. military presence here, but the Iranians are building up their troop presence on the border, closest border to Kuwait, it kind of doesn't add up. It kind of doesn't align well with what they're putting out in the Wall Street Journal. So I say put a pin in that story, and we'll have to watch and see what happens. Now, Iran also hits the U.S.'s Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain. We did have tons of footage of that taking place. And now it's not just Kuwait that is calling for a drawdown of troops. Apparently, Jordanians are also not too happy with this relationship. I guess you could call it an occupation of U.S. troops in their country. Some Jordanians dare to speak out against U.S. troop presence. Hundreds of Jordanian political, legal, and public figures have signed an open letter demanding the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Jordan. They call the American presence a security, political, and economic risk, pulling the country into a war it wants no part of. Most Jordanian outlets refused to publish the letter, and organizers warned signatories could be jailed. Undoubtedly. I think just a jail sentence would probably be the lightest, best case scenario for these Jordanian dissidents, you could call them. But they're well within their rights to say this. I mean, why should you not be allowed to speak out against U.S. occupation bases in your own country? Henry Kissinger was the one who said it best. He said, he said it's dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, but it's deadly to be an ally of the United States. Kuwait has found that out. Ukraine has found that out. Jordan has found that out. And all of these countries will sooner or later find that out. So we'll see what happens here. It seems as though the U.S. is already making a bit of a move on their own out of the Muwafaq Salti Air Base because of how hard they were hammered, how hard they were torched in the past 20-day period. And remember, during the period before the Memorandum of Understanding, Iran's targeting of the Muwafaq Salti Air Base and other air bases in Jordan hosted by the United States were limited, extremely limited compared to the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, so on and so forth, Saudi Arabia. They really didn't hit Jordan all that hard during the war. Yes, they did hit them, but it wasn't what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is something that I don't even know if I expected this to happen. It is a huge, huge escalation. And now Trump, it's an escalation that Trump has no answer for. So what is Trump doing? Well, DeBurgo, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. Trump is just crashing out. President Trump to Fox News says, we are going to beat the shit out of Iran. Yeah, you and what army? How do you plan to do that? The U.S. military is currently conducting airstrikes in Iran. So this was July 30th at 2:30 a.m. local time in Iran. The U.S. military launched a series of airstrikes. As a result, again, this is the same thing we've seen over the last 20 days. What does Iran do? Iran hits F-35s, F-16s. They hit drones. They hit military barracks. They hit fuel tankers. They hit air refueling tanker jets. They hit literally everything you could possibly imagine. They even hit power plants and desal plants in Kuwait. And then the U.S. goes into Iran and just bombs the same old stuff that they've already bombed 20 times throughout the entirety of this war. They said, oh, that tower in Chabahar that we've already bombed 5 times, let's bomb it one more time. That abandoned metal scrapyard for fishing boats in southern Iran, let's bomb that one again. That Arash-2 drone that we've already downed and bombed, let's bomb it one more time. That's what they did this time as well. The U.S. military carried out airstrikes in Iran. Let's see what they hit. Well, for starters, the U.S. bombed a pier in Sirik, which has already been bombed 11 previous times. So they bombed it for a 12th time because why not? They have no intelligence. No intelligence. This is not just outdated intelligence. If you've hit a pier 11 times, you're just operating off of nothing. You're just sending some guys up in the air, or you're sending some missiles, I guess, from the soil of Gulf nations, and you're just sending them to and fro. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to these strikes. There is no military advantage to these strikes. How on earth is hitting a pier on the coast of Iran for a 12th time going to result in any of the goals that Trump has set out through the duration of this conflict? Reopening the Strait of Hormuz, regime change in Iran, you name it. These are the goals, but he's bombing a pier for the 12th time. This is objectively more ludicrous of a military strategy than Ukraine, bombing wild berries in Moscow. What Ukraine is doing is terrorism. Of course, it achieves no goals insofar as securing their front line in Kramatorsk or Slavyansk. But at the very least, they can do something like that and hope that it's going to affect the psyche of Russians, or hope that it's going to affect the economy in Moscow. But what is Trump doing? He's bombing a pier for a 12th time. It's actually just like you're living in a fantasy delusion world that none of this makes sense. The U.S. also launched strikes against Abadan, Bushehr, Khorramshahr, Kish. They've hit all these targets many times before. Basically, they're hitting the south again. They also hit Avaz. It's the same target bank each and every time. This time, however, they did strike a civilian area in Keshem, and an Iranian family was martyred. So they're in tandem with, hitting these same outdated targets. They're throwing in a little terrorism. They're hitting some civilians in there as well. President Trump apparently lost his temper during a security meeting held on July 30th at 2 p.m. Iran time, local time in Iran. President Trump lost his temper during a security meeting, shouting and cursing out of frustration over the military options presented to him and the lack of progress toward a deal with Iran. Yeah, well, if you want a deal, let me just spin it to you simply here. Bombing civilians in Keshem is not the answer. Now, we do have news. This was reported today. President Trump will convene with senior members of his administration, the national security team, and military leaders today at Camp David to discuss Iran. So ring, ring, we have a new escalation of the conflict that's about to hit us all. Israel says the U.S. is preparing for something bigger than anything we've seen before in the war in Iran, a senior Israeli security official told Channel 15. The officials add that the U.S. is preparing for a large-scale, unprecedented operation against Iran, not just a single isolated response, with Israeli defense circles saying the U.S. is approaching a major counter-response. So that sounds to me as though they are preparing some sort of a ground operation. Because what does bombing these same outdated targets in the south of Iran do? It does nothing. Netanyahu, I guess, can look at this and be somewhat content. The war is still ongoing. We're not on the de-escalation path, but he's only going to be happy with escalation. Elections are coming up in Israel, and Netanyahu, guess what, is currently on Polymarket, at least, these betting sites. He is not positioned According to the betting odds, Vegas odds, he's not positioned to win. In fact, he's pretty, far behind in second place. So Netanyahu needs escalation. It's not that he wants it. It's not that this is about some dream he's had for his entire career. He literally needs escalation, and he needs Israel back in the conflict. He came out of his meeting in the Oval Office grinning ear to ear. I've never seen him that happy. Why is he saying that this was the best meeting he's ever had with Trump? Because he knows something big is coming. And I happen to believe that something big is coming from the United States as well. Trump went out and gave some statements to the press today. He said, "We will continue to carry out strong attacks against Iran. In the end, they'll have no choice to back down." I don't know what he believes is a strong attack when we're talking about just bombing the same targets in the south of Iran, but okay. The war in Iran is going very well. We're continuing to have major victories. Iranian drone attack against Kuwait took place as he was out there speaking to the media. So we had another attack on Kuwait today. And Trump also speaking to reporters, he said this. So a reporter asked him, "Last time the U.S. also said the strikes were intended to degrade Iran's ability to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz. How many more strikes will it take?" President Trump responded, "Well, you never know. Look, most people would have given up by now. They've got no Navy. They've got no Air Force. Most people would have given up, but they haven't. So I give them credit for that. They're known for being tough. They're tough." Well, I can't disagree with Trump there. They are tough. But how on earth does anyone on the face of the planet still believe this lie that Iran has no Navy, no Air Force? I mean, literally, you have President Putin going out this weekend saying how impressed he is by Iran's decentralized, naval operations that they've been able to carry out. Instead of these grand, massive warships, Iran has 3,000 speedboats that they can launch in any direction at any moment and interdict any ship at their choosing. They can launch naval, these naval drones into the sea. They have mines. They have whatever they need, right? You don't need a giant ass warship. A giant ass warship is just a target begging to be sunk to the bottom of the sea as far as Iran is concerned. And, I think that there's no disagreeing with it when you look at this, past few months of conflict. So how could you say they have no Navy? How could anyone believe it? When we have U.S. service members still getting killed, when you have the U.S. evacuating base in Jordan, our main U.S. air base in Jordan, and also talking now about evacuating the Ali al-Salam air base in Kuwait, how could you still come out here and believe or say these things? I don't know, but there are people who believe it. And this was the funniest one of all. Trump said, right now, Iran, maybe they're getting a little stronger, but later they'll get weaker. Just nonsense. Just nonsense from Trump. What else can you expect? Oh, boy. Well, I come out here. I repeat myself yet again. This is not going well for the United States. But look, if Trump wants to ensure that things go really south, already we've seen what? It's like 30% of Americans only approve of this conflict. Only 30% of Americans. You can't get 70% of Americans to agree on much of anything. But if he wants this really to go south, if he wants his poll numbers to really tank, if he wants the GOP to really get swamped in the midterm elections, a ground invasion would surely do that. Ground invasion against Iran. Iran, think about it. Think about it. In 2003, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, do any of you know what the population of Iraq was back then? Take a guess. The population of Iraq in 2003 was 25 million. The population of Iran today is 85 to 90 million. And you want to know something else? When the U.S. invaded Iraq, Iraq was, they were not unified. There was so much division in Iraq back then. Iran is unified. Iran is so unified that when I went to Iran a few weeks ago, I met so many people that were like, yeah, you know what? I traveled back here during the war. I couldn't even imagine the idea of not being on my home turf, on my soil, on the land that I love, my homeland, when we are facing this aggression from the U.S. and Israel and the complicit Gulf states. I couldn't imagine it. That Iran had like a net increase in their population during a war. That never happens. Look at Ukraine. Ukraine is basically a non-existent country now because not just, Russia has liberated a quarter of the country or whatever, but because we've got so many people fleeing. They don't believe Iran is unified. Iraq was not in 2003. Most of the military leadership from the IRGC, these men of steel, they were crafted, they were forged in the Iran-Iraq war of the 80s. Iran was not prepared as they should have been for the Iran-Iraq war. Iraq was armed to the teeth. They were much, much better armed than Iran. But Iran, they absorbed the invasion. They fought like hell. They even took over part of Iraq. They took the Al-Faw Peninsula. For 2 years, they held it. And the operation in which they took the Al-Faw Peninsula was something for the movies. Of course, they won't ever make a movie of that. You had these Iranian engineers assembling a pontoon bridge below the water surface. And then in the morning, they came in and they put these air tanks on it and lifted it up to the water surface, and they crossed it. It's amazing. What I'm saying is that this is not going to go well. By the way, we're not in 2003. We're not in 1980. We're in 2026. Baby, this is the era of drone warfare. And if there's one thing Iran knows, it's drones. Where is Uncle Sam going to hide? When the drones start flying, when the missiles start flying, where are they going to hide? Iran started creating their mosaic defense infrastructure in a very meaningful way after the Iran-Iraq war. And everything they did was prepared under the auspices that they would, in fact, face an external threat from the United States. They've prepared for this for decades. If you want this war to really go south, try a ground invasion. See how it goes. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or GiveSendGo. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.